All right. So with that, we will move over to our next section of the conference, which is our panel discussion. And we have with us Paramita Debbarman. She is the executive and leadership coach as well as international speaker. And she has kindly agreed to share with the community her experience and wisdom. So welcome, Paramita, to the conference. And thanks a lot once again for being here with us.
Thank you, Sandeep. It's a privilege and honor to be part of this group. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Then we have Thomas Bookhamer. He is the author of The Leader's Factor, and he has been working in various different transformations, working with different leaders, and I have a huge respect for the work that Thomas has done in terms of the leadership journey, as he calls it. Welcome, Thomas, for joining us on the conference. I really thank you for your time today, and looking to learn from your wisdom and experience.
My pleasure. And thank you, Sudeep, for having me.
And
thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much. And then we have Prasanna Sankaran. He is an enterprise transformation leader and coach with IBM. He's also part of our core team. He has been instrumental, as I was sharing yesterday, in rephrasing some of the values of the manifesto and getting to the shape where it is today. So the cornerstone in terms of some of the work that we are doing as community. So thank you, Prasanna, for agreeing to be on the panel and sharing your wisdom with us. So let me get us kick started with some of the questions that we have received from various people and teams. So I think the first question that we have been talking about today a lot more about the we started with what do we mean by ethics, then we talked about the values, and then we talked about culture and the sustainability trio that Amol shared. So I would like to get us started with the first thing is in the current world, right? I mean, we all talk about psychological safety. So Paramita, as a life coach and as a leadership coach, what is your take on psychological safety to begin with?
Psychological safety is it's something which is within every human being, and it's a need. It's a basic human need. In when we look at human beings across cultures, across geographies, across countries, across age groups, across mindsets, this safety is something which is a requirement, and unless it is there, a person cannot perform up to the ultimate potential that this person is called for. So that safety is very important, because unless it is there, the performance of the person is definitely going to get impacted with all other stuff. Because whatever we do it with a desire for safety. Even when somebody is in a job or in a business, somewhere at the back of it, it's all about something about stability, something about safety, something about an assurance which is driving that person. So it's very important.
Thank you. So just building on top of it, because you mentioned that it is an individual need at every level. So when as a life coach, you work with individuals, right? So you might be seeing those kind of challenges during your coaching where people are coming with. So at work front, I think now with the so much of marketing and so much of buzzword around psychological safety, at least we, not being psychologists, but at least we now are able to understand some of the traits of what it means and what it is. But if I take this a little bit further, where the manifesto goes, where we talk about not just I or we, but we are talking about the us in terms of the society or in terms of the overall planet. How do you see this concept painting in our society? I mean, do you think that psychological safety is a need of the society or just for the business world?
It is absolutely a need of the society, the psychological safety, when we look at it from that perspective. And that's where increasingly I would say that we are actually going back to the times when we should move from competition to collaboration. So be it in business, be it in anything that we do, I think success is going to get defined in the days to come more on collaboration than on competition, and that is where the psychological safety again comes in, because it's a win-win situation and a win-win scenario.
Perfect, perfect. And I think somewhere I read about this definition of success. I don't know from where we have got to a point where the competition becomes the ultimate thing, and there is only one winner. I remember we calling or reading something in. I was reading about the ancient history of how the overall the first civilization during the Harappa Mohenjo-daro period. And what I read there is there used to be a game where they used to have everybody as winners. And that was a very powerful concept that I read. That goes back to like 10,000 years back, I would say. But those kind of concept, I think, will need to resurface for us to become, I wouldn't say human again, but better humans.
I can probably just give you a small example, Sandeep, on this is actually during these times when there has been the lockdown, the pandemic, and people have lost their jobs, and where I have been coaching entrepreneurs who are entrepreneurs not by choice, but because they don't have money to sustain their families, and how the whole thing about the competition, collaboration, and that psychological safety has taken shape. As an example, now, you are talking about Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, those times. I go back even to the prehistoric times also. If you look back at our civilization, when it started off, there were some who were farmers who would grow crops, and there were some who would go out into the jungle and who would be the hunters. So the farmer would get the wheat and the hunters would get the meat, and that is how they would exchange, and they had that stability, that assurance that each one is going to help each other. And this is where the whole thing about collaboration comes in. And history repeats itself. That's where we are heading, to look at how as a team we can collaborate and we can succeed together.
Perfect.
And like I was sharing the small example of I was doing some free webinars and some free coaching sessions for the people who are hurting and suddenly they didn't have a source of income and how they can sustain themselves. So a long story short, as I was in a particular workshop, I found there was an insurance agent who had not sold a single insurance in the last 90 days. And he was in debt, did not have money to support his family. There was another lady whose business had just stopped, and she didn't know what to do, how to go about it, but she had a good network, good number of people. And then there was a third lady over there who actually wanted to earn some extra money because that was the need of the hour, but who was good in selling. And then I realized that we just have to put all these three together, because the gentleman who was an insurance agent had the product. The other person had the network, and there was somebody who could sell. And they could just get together and start something and sustain themselves in these difficult times. Long story short, I checked with them later on. The two ladies still continue. They have started importing some cosmetics and started a new company of their own.
That's very, very powerful story, Paramita. And that way, I think through coaching, you have contributed to the society in a very, very powerful way. So thank you for that, sharing that story with us. So building on top of it, right? I would move to Thomas in terms of from a leadership perspective. What do you think, Thomas? What leaders need to do to provide the right environment for number one, creating this kind of psychological safe culture, and also catalyzing autonomy and innovation along the way?
I love it. Thank you for asking that. So this catalyst of autonomy and innovation. So I believe, and I've created this leader's journey on the idea that this evolution from authority to influence. So I also define leadership as influence, right? If you don't have influence in somebody's life, then it's very difficult to lead them. You're left with authority. And I think in our culture, even in our homes, if we go outside of the workplace, it's the same idea. We seem to be building on this idea of authority, right? So it's either authority in knowledge, or it's authority in title or position. And we see that a lot in our corporate environments. this autocratic management culture of authority. So I think there's a tipping point between authority and influence. And influence is where you're going to have your innovation. So let's think about this. If we're working in an autocratic management culture of authority, in other words, you're telling people what to do. You're directing instead of connecting. See, just we just talked about this shift to competition, to this idea of connecting. This movement from directing to connecting is what I'm talking about here when it comes to our culture of our environment. Instead of directing people, see, if you're directing people, then in telling them what to do, you're restricting innovation. And so also, if you're directing people, you're kind of putting a damper or a lid on their intrinsic values. I think we all get up every day and we want to add value. We want to add value in our work. We want to add value to each other. We want to add value to the people around us. That's what feels really good, even beyond getting paid or working for a paycheck. But we end up in this paycheck environment because when we, let's say, go to work, if we go to a culture that is directive, if we go to an autocratic management culture of authority and we're being told what to do, then there's no room for me to add value. I just need to do what I'm told. Even in my childhood, my influencers, my father, my uncles, and so on, back when I entered the workforce, the late 50s and early 60s, so that probably makes me the oldest guy in the room anymore. That seems to be the case. But I was told, go to work, do your job, do what you're told, go home, pay your bills, take care of your family, right? That's how I was told. There's no innovation in that. It's very directive. So in this environment of this autocratic management culture of authority, I think we need to evolve to a leadership culture of innovation. And to do that, I actually have a value statement that says, in order to have increased effectiveness and greater influence, you need to add value to people. Now, to add value to people, you need to connect with them. And to connect with people, then you need to move from me to we. So the 4 values of this leader's journey and how we change this autocratic management culture to a culture of leadership and innovation is to move from me to we. That's first. If you can't get outside yourself and care about others and move from me to we, then you're going to stay in this culture of authority where it's easier there because you don't have to build relationships. I think we do that because of that. We don't have to build relationships. We don't have to build trust. We just tell people what to do. We're in this autocratic management culture of authority. Me to we's first, then you connect, which also takes a lot of energy. You connect through questions, you connect through finding common ground, but it takes energy, it takes time. You have to get out there in your workspace and even in your family or people that you know and connect with them, find common ground, care about them. Next is add value to them. And you really can't add value to them until you move from me to we and you connect. See, I can't add value to you, Sandeep, until I know what you value, until I connect with you. Then I can add true value to your life. If I don't connect with you, then the value that I add probably is masked by my agenda. I may be doing what I call servant leadership, but my agenda is behind that. In other words, I'm serving you so that you can get done something for me, right?
Yeah.
And that's truly not adding value. Unless I connect, unless I move from me to we, and I get to know you, then I can add value to you because I know what you value. If I do that, if I move from me to we, if I connect, if I add value, then I'm actually going to have influence in your life. That means that has the opportunity, respectfully, to lead. If you have influence, you can lead through that influence, but it's based on that me to we, connect, add value. So I think that's how we can, that's the catalyst for changing our environment to this leadership culture of innovation is to move away from that authority. It's this moving from directing to connecting.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. And that was elaborate, Thomas. So thank you for that. So just building on top, and we have a question from in the chat around So as a community, right, taking this concept of me to we, and as part of the Sustainable Agile Manifesto, I always talk about if you really want to race towards sustainability, and that can only happen when you start from I to we, and then you take this further to us. That means you need to think about the society, you need to think about the planet, you need to think about the earth in general, right? So the question here is on the same line. So what do we need to do as a community to enable leaders to think beyond creating shareholder value to creating impact on the community and for the community?
I think it's a very interesting question, Sandeep. And I'm really glad because, the first of all, I would like to say, I could really resonate with what Paramita and, Thomas was saying, because I can already feel that I'm connected to the community. And, though we're actually not aware of each other earlier on, and we just kind of coming together as a community, and that's really the power of community. And I can resonate with what we're talking about here on two essential aspects here. One is about having the psychological safety being built, and how we're actually going to be more ensuring that the leaders understand the value of empowerment and autocratic management. I think that actually it brings me to the key point here about how do we actually help the leaders, enable them to think through what's beyond shareholder value. I think we spoke about this, I'm sure yesterday. I think it's more about purpose-driven transformations is the key essential aspect, and I think the significance of purpose-driven transformation is what is more and more becoming essential than profit-driven transformations. And I think you hit the nail yesterday when we were talking about that. It's going to be purpose defining the profit, and not actually the vice versa. I think it is going to be more and more important for us to enable that. And how can that happen is actually more about bringing the collective outcomes. It's more of outcome-based organizations, and having them achievable is only through having the co-located minds. And I think given this now pandemic situation, I would see slightly different parameter, but very much aligned to the overall thinking, is that on the positive side, COVID has actually brought in a big impact positively, I would say, right? I think especially on the psychological safety aspect. And not funny enough, but I think to start with to say, I think physical distancing is a classic example. It's being expressed as the shared fear. So everybody is actually maintaining the physical distancing as a shared fear, but it is really accelerating the open conversations. And so everybody is now having an opportunity to actually collaborate even virtually. And I think that actually brings in a lot of improvements in the communications, the way we're actually connecting, and it is actually becoming part and parcel of life to actually staying connected with across the organization, across globally, and make sure that you are actually contributing yourself with your co-located thinking. I think that makes it more and more effective for us to actually move towards purpose-driven transformations and outcome-based transformations than always driven by the shadow profits.
Thank you, Prasanna. Thank you for those insights. So going back on the point of collaborate versus compete, in the leadership arena, right? Especially if you are leading a company and then another CEO leading another company, there is an inherent competition there. So in those kind of environment, like when you take this notion or the value of competing versus collaborating, how do you create at a personal level, right, that kind of collaboration where you can tap upon the leadership as a community? We don't see that kind of example very often where leaders collaborate together, right? That is an area where you have the power tussle and the egos coming in, and thinking that I am the smartest person in the room, those kind of situations, right? So do you think, Paramita, this concept of being getting this leadership at itself as a community, or making this leadership as a community so that everybody can collaborate and then defy the challenges of not their own organization but for the greater good of the society?
First of all, the ground level reality is we all individually have we have that power within us to take our own decisions. We take our own decisions. So it is an individual choice for each and every person, whether we want to collaborate or we don't want to collaborate, to compete or to collaborate. But I would say it is wisdom to actually think about collaboration. And that is where I'll also build up a little bit on what Prasanna has said about the transformation, the purposeful transformation mindset. When we talk about purpose-driven transformation, it starts with an individual. And if a person really wants to collaborate, then it's about also looking at the big picture, that how, first of all, it starts with I, right? We said, right? I, we, and us. So how do I bring in value to the bigger community? How can my contribution help of having a wider and a bigger perspective? And then when we look at our own life purpose from a higher perspective, and then we see how can we leverage and come together and bring in bigger impact, because the power of two is stronger than power of one, and power of three, and then it goes on, right? It's exponential. And that is where the whole thing is about. And we see it also in the companies. We do look at where there are mergers and acquisitions which are happening, because it comes up that there is a potential of collaboration, because it's the same client base which is getting served. So why not serve more powerfully and become a market leader, and then step ahead and go and serve even more. So it all depends, I would say, Sandeep, number one, the mindset, and number one, a very individual choice that a leader will take first and then take it forward. And
Thank
of
you.
course, then because of the leadership, it's the culture of the organization which gets the flavor of what the leader has in mind.
Absolutely. I think you actually hit the right spot there on the leadership defines the culture of the organization for the majority of it. And that is where I think my segue towards the next question, Thomas, that I wanted to kind of bring in is, based on your experience working with different leaders, different geographies, what are the challenges of introducing this um, influence or authority or collaboration or competition kind of practices? And when you are dealing with a very hierarchical, a very risk averse, or very kind of information sensitive type of domain, right? Because those are the ones where this kind of practices sounds too good to be true.
I love it. Thank you. And Paramita, I really like your ideas on this movement towards collaboration, and that plays into this. So if we're in an environment of competition, right, as opposed to collaboration, environment of authority, if you will, then it's hard to build trust, that kind of thing. And I think those are some of the challenges in communication. It is a big challenge. A lot of times, if we're speaking from this positional place of authority, you're right. I think one of the most liberating moments I had in my life was when I realized that I didn't have to be right. As a matter of fact, being right was too hard. It's too hard to be right all the time. And when I gave that up, right? So you mentioned ego and all that. This was a moment for me that changed my life. To not have to be right was liberating. And so that kind of idea in our corporate environments and in our lives, I was able to step back and learn. And I found that one of the I've reflected on this, and one of the greatest ways that I've learned in my life is through shared experience. So when you are able to give up that ego and realize that not only you don't have to be right, but you don't have to have all the answers. I think it's a leadership myth. The leaders think they have to have all the answers. I'm the leader, so I have to have all the answers. The greatest answer comes from your team, right? Comes from outside yourself. And to do that, then you have to have that liberating moment that was in my life, where I don't have to be right. I don't have to have all the answers. I think that, and encouraging that, is a growth mindset, because that's when I actually started to grow and sharing experience. So not having to be right, allowing myself to be wrong, allowing others to be wrong, and learn from our mistakes, So I also believe that we don't learn. You hear this statement of experience is the greatest teacher. Well, I don't think that's actually true. I think evaluated experience is the greatest teacher, right? And if we don't evaluate our experiences, then we miss the learning. And that experience really isn't over, even if it was a less than, not, an experience that you didn't get the expectation you thought you were gonna get. There's a growth opportunity there, but only if you evaluate that experience, get feedback. I think that's another big part of this growth mindset, is to allow feedback, allow shared experience. I think that is if we promote that along with collaboration instead of competition, like Paramita is saying, is in my experience, that opportunity. So to do that, you have to build that trust again. We're back to connecting and adding value, letting people know that you care about them. One of my mentors, John Maxwell, always says all the time, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. And so that's part of the me to we, and part of this growth mindset. If I want you to care what I actually have to say, then I have to care about you. I have to let you know that I care. If we do that, then we can build this growth mindset, along with, like I say, encouraging the idea that it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to not have the answer. It's okay to ask. And shared experiences are, to me, one of the most powerful teaching opportunities.
Thank you, Thomas. So on this point, Prasanna, right, as a leader, let's assume that, I listened to Thomas carefully, and I basically, went through all this, whatever he is talking about. Okay, so, I went from, let me connect with you, let me collaborate with you, let me care about you. So I kind of made these 3C as my motto of my life. And I learned all the tricks of the trade now, right? So, how do I connect? How do I collaborate? How do I care about you? But as a leader, right, I mean, there is always this urge to go on this, notion of having the authority. I mean, with this title driven industries, right, where we are currently are in, right? So this title basically gives you, all the time, it basically urges you or have this kind of, attraction towards going back to the older ways. So what are some of the practices or some of the tools that as leaders we can use to make sure it sustains, right? Going back to the sustainability. So yeah, I learned the new tricks of the game, but how can I get better at it? And how can I make it sustainable for my own leadership? In your experience, what do you see?
No, absolutely. So basically, first of all, you are actually now talking about already sustainability, because which means that you've already qualified with all the prerequisites, with the 3Cs. So that's really a good first step towards getting into the sustainability mode. And I think two fundamental things in addition to that, what you just said, is I think what is about like growth mindset, and and I think I could really immediately resonate with Thomas when he was saying about letting that ego go off. So I mean, the way I started actually looking at it when I really started doing the transformations, several years back, is actually when I started myself embracing the practice of, going with the mindset of everybody is right, partially. So that gives me an opportunity for me to be innovative and, kind of bring in my own perspective and also share my views, and at the same time also appreciate where they are coming from. I think that's the first step, and having the growth mindset and having them really an open-minded, a discussion to actually collaborate to improve. I think that's a fundamental first step. And the second thing is also very, very significant part of the transformation is also whenever an organization or a leader is actually looking to strive to improve. Most importantly, it is not something which always they drive that. I think it is actually an organizational move, and it is not just them actually driving the force, right? I think it is more actually bi-directional. And this is lately I've been practicing quite a lot, and it's been really powerful on the ground, especially with large organizations having completely a global span across the multiple geographies, and in the spirit of pandemic now being virtual, with really hierarchical matrix organization where you actually have several federal business enablers, business portfolios actually striving towards a common organizational change, at the enterprise level. Fundamentally, it is more about having that bi-directional transformation vision being set up. Basically, what it means is the organizational leaders set only the objectives and the vision at the top, and probably from the objectives, the teams, the business portfolios on the ground actually defines how do we achieve that and what does that mean by achieving that goal. So it is not just, everything is actually coming cascade down from the top down and then say, here is what we're actually going to go towards and everybody is defining that. It's more like making it bi-directional is one of the key stepping stone I've seen. I think that is really making it powerful to actually engage and, hear and from the ground, which is practical, which is actually more kind of pragmatic situations. They would actually explain what is required for us to be really changing what we want to change. And if it is sometimes moonshot thinking, unless you kind of hear from the ground, you can't really achieve that. So you will like end up with the roof shot, not the moonshot, right? So that's really essential to be, from bi-directional.
So one thing I was wondering, based on what you just described, this bi-directional approach, right? And then having a growth mindset and also inculcating all those 3 C's, right? So it goes back to kind of creating a learning culture, right? Always learning mindset. So Paramita, in your experience, right, when you're talking to all these individuals and leaders as well as the teams, how do you guide them in terms of how should I continue to have this learning mindset? What is some of the practices that I can use on a day-to-day basis that keeps this learning mindset alive? Or in other ways, what are some of the signs that I should think about? Oh, this is I should not do. What kind of triggers I should watch out for?
Actually, Sandeep, the learning mindset is already so much there that I think it's actually time for people to pause and question the learning that they're going towards. Especially now with so much of emphasis on online education, certifications, people are just going for the certifications, thinking once I have the certification, then I'm ready. But I would say that a true growth mindset and a learning mindset is not about acquiring knowledge only, but having the wisdom to apply it somewhere. Because just learning and not applying it in the practical sense, after some time the learning will fizzle out, because it has not been applied. So to have a more powerful growth, a real growth mindset will be application of to have the knowledge, the learning, and to apply it somewhere. Because that is where whatever you have learned is now going to be iterative and it brings in value to yourself, to other people, to your companies, to the community. And then this also gives a motivation that I have learned something and I'm applying it and I'm seeing the results. Instead of just going like certification to certification and thinking that, okay, now I think I have the experience, but actually you don't. And that is where I would say true growth mindset would be first being mindful. Why am I doing the certification? Why am I learning? And where is the path? What is the path? Where am I headed? Where is my future? Where is the end? Have the end in the mind, then start from here. How do I reach there? And as I'm learning, how do I apply it? That would I would say that is the way towards a growth mindset.
Thank you for sharing. I think this is when I was sharing yesterday, the background and the context of why and how the manifesto came to life. One of the things I was debating myself was the overall aspect of why transformations are failing and why we have created an industrial nexus that basically promotes certification over application. And I think you nailed it out with that one single statement that learning is essential, but application is mandatory. So I think that's really powerful, Paramita. Thank you for sharing and echoing those words with us. Now I will be basically going to a little bit, deviating from the leadership towards more around the future of work, right? And when we talk about future of work, Thomas, what do you think is the way the companies will shape up, the society will shape up in the coming years after I mean, COVID is an I would say an accelerator for what we call as digital, but it is also a deteriorator for a lot many other things as a society for us. So, what's your take on the future of work in from where we are as a society today?
The future of work. What a great question. And I think referring even to COVID, I think we've learned a little more about collaboration. This has created a different environment. When we think back on, looking at history a little bit, some empirical thinking, we see what I think there's a term that we call digital disruption, and that there was this brick and mortar kind of idea that look how digital disruption, in a sense, one of the biggest examples I know, Blockbuster tried to stick with their brick and mortar stores and not go digital, and the idea that digital came along completely changed that company. And now we have, of course, content to the internet. You don't have to go rent a movie in a brick and mortar store. Big difference. So we see digital disruption changing the world. And now with this onset of COVID, in the same way, there's been this big wave of changing the way we communicate and collaborate. It's made it much more not just effective, but available globally. We have this digital opportunity has changed the way we communicate globally. Here I am, I'm 13 hours behind you guys. You guys are, in your evening, I'm in my morning. We're on different sides of the world. From a lot of folks on here, I love getting on these calls and finding out people are, either in the middle of their night or it's tomorrow for somebody than compared to my today. That has really changed things, and I think it opens up the world. It opens up collaboration. It opens up communication. So I think with that as a foundation, our ability to experience new things and be aware of things that are going on around the world. There's so much information available. It's just unlocking innovation and unlocking in people's minds the thought that let's call it possibility thinking, if you will. I think there's a lot of thinking skills, and possibility thinking is something that now in today's world, there's permission in our culture, in this technology, to think about the possibility of things. I compare that to where I grew up. My world when I grew up was like 2 blocks big. I was allowed to, go between Alati and Cayley, 2 different streets, and in there was kind of a safe zone. I could run around and know all my neighbors and all that. And my school was 3 blocks away. And so my world was really small. You think about children today, I think about, my grandchildren, 6, 7 years old, they talk to me about things. They're aware of so much because their world, they're on their iPads, they know about, they have awareness about this whole world, instead of just, when I was their age, I only knew about 2 blocks. My world was that big. It was only 2 blocks big. Their world is huge, and that is allowing them to evolve in a environment that has so much potential. It's just unlocked innovation and this possibility thinking that, wow, we can do anything. And if we can't, we can get the information in a heartbeat, or we can find somebody that can give us ideas or collaborate. It's just really changed. I think the future is incredibly exciting because of that unlocking through this digital technology.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing your childhood memories with us, Thomas. I really like that. I mean, I grew up in a similar environment, a very small village, and I was sharing that yesterday, and even on my blog, that growing up, I saw some of the challenges that nature forces us upon, whether it is droughts, or whether it is the heat, or whether it is the power of growing in a field, like where you can actually go and see your field, see the crops growing up, and touch and feel. That
Right.
kind of environment to truly from the countryside or a village side to now into the central all the artificial things of the buildings and the rocks. So I think it's a long journey. So yeah, thanks for reminding that, Thomas. So Prasanna, I think one of the things that I see with this future of work, and one of the common fear that we are getting, that the human touch or the human to human connection, right? Even though virtually we are able to do it, and then use of technology, somewhere the human touch is kind of missing, right? There is a big craving for people to really experience things in the personal way, or the kind of face to face, where you can shake hands with people, you can talk to them over coffee, you can basically sit with them and have beer together. That is not happening with the current situation, right? So what do you think, will uh, this open up new opportunity, like from an industry point of view, right? So the personal or the human touch, will it become premium services in coming days? What do you think? What's your view on that opportunity side of this?
Well,
Interesting.
that's a great question, because see, even if you now meet face to face, you're not actually like having the liberty of actually having shaking hands, or sitting more than like in a larger crowd. I mean, I think I really envy that the whole future of work is going to be really hybrid, and I can really see that, and I could see that actually since that actually was like 10 years back at least, and I could see that actually coming in quite hectic on digital, even like I was trying transformations in hospitals in the United States, and largely you can see that the transformations were in the hospitals were quite mind blowing, with all the robotics to have the medical supplies, and the supplies of the medicines to the different departments, operation theaters, and then you have the tele consultations with the specialists all across the globe, with the medical transformations and the healthcare. And now I can really relate to that, because very recently in the last year, I've seen this in my experience myself. It's one of the largest industrial oil and gas transformation, and you can see that it was a very, very safety critical environment, which is absolutely nowhere even thinking of actually going virtual, and they had absolutely no concept of being virtual. And you could see that they had to actually adapt to the situation, because globally everybody is shut down, and so they actually adapted very quickly, being an agile organization. And you can see that completely now they are able to kind of change the operating model of having a very hybrid situation, of having only the very, very safety critical aspects of operations being carried out with human intellectual on the ground, and people actually collaborating from virtually. So even though people are not co-located, to your point, I think the physical touch is still not there, not possible with so many people actually being there on the ground. But what makes it really powerful is actually having the co-located minds, irrespective of wherever you are. And I think that is essential. I think that becomes that actually the co-located minds is what actually is enabling us to become more human, and having that empathy towards how we're actually caring for each other, and how we are actually collaborating to kind of contribute to the value. And I've seen this live, and I was really first of all like stumbled to see like how this organization is going to transform, because they haven't actually had a concept of remote working or virtual working. And from there it has become there's no choice, right? You have to actually be adaptable, but at the same time they're kind of clearly open-minded, and trying to explore, and dare to courageously actually adopt, and then see how best we can do it with a minimal impact on safety, which is a topmost priority for them. And when it is successful there, why not in other areas, in other regions, other industries?
Okay, thank you. Hey Shane, I saw you raised the hand. You wanted to contribute something?
No, that was bumped the wrong button. Sorry.
No worries.
Just really, really enjoying the conversation.
Now that you're on mic, I just wanted to leverage this opportunity to ask you one question, Shane, on this topic of ethics, right? And that you talked about ethics for agile coaches this when we started today's keynote. But what about ethics for leaders?
I would love to see every leadership training include an ethical framework and ethical conversations. If you go to most of the universities, most of the MBA programs, they do discuss ethics. We don't see it, so they know about it. Whether how well they apply it, and yes, I would love it to see it much as a topic that is just more thoroughly engaged with across organizations, top down. If we think about sustainability, we look at the organizations have a responsibility to society to do good, and moving beyond the shareholder return being the only measure, and even the global, it's nearly midnight and I forgot the name of the organization, but the world,
ESG, you mean, or this Global Sustainability Index, something like that?
Yeah. Brain's gone to sleep. But these business conglomerates, these business organizations are recognizing that shareholder return was actually a false promise.
False promise.
And we've got to change the why of our organizations today. And societal benefits, sustainability, all of those things matter. So yeah, ethics weaves into that.
Okay, perfect. So I think with that, I would like to thank all of you to be here today. It was really very intense and interesting discussions. Hopefully we all have learned a lot, especially myself. I have learned a lot with the kind of discussions and the examples, Paramita, you shared from real life, and the kind of memories you brought back, Thomas. So thank you very much for that. And Prasanna, you're the excitement on the transformations that you have worked upon, and all the people, process, and tools side of things. So really insightful and encouraging that we as a community are really growing, and your support will be continuous with this. I hope so. And then we continue to have this dream of making this world a better place.